But in the early 90s, a small group of composers, believing new music had deviated too far from that tradition, made Birtwhistle the focus of a campaign to redress the balance. This is Frederick Stocken.
In the 20th century, the idea was that you sort of didn't have the audience in mind. In a way, I don't have the audience in mind either. I write, you know, you just have to write what you think is great and fantastic, and hope you get near the mark.
In 1994, Stocken joined forces with this man, conductor and fellow composer Keith Burstein.
Somewhat to my own surprise, actually, I found that my own music didn't sound like most contemporary classical music. It was very tuneful and romantic and ravishingly beautiful in a way that is kind of relatable to earlier music.
Stocken and Burstein believed the majority of people couldn't identify with new music, and they wanted the establishment to commission music more like their own. So they came up with a plan that would propel them and their music into the limelight.
The curtain fell at the Royal Opera House a few minutes ago. The usual well-bred, well-heeled applause was peppered by a chorus of boos and jeers. They came from a group calling themselves the Hecklers, who've decided they've had enough of modern music and want to return to tunes people can hum.
The Hecklers successfully caused a media furore with their protest at the end of a performance of Birtwhistle's opera Gawain.
This stuff is dead. It's old hat. We've got to move to the future now with a restoration of melody, restoration of classical principles. There is an alternative voice now which the establishment must know about.
How was the heckling, Gordon?
Well, it was reasonably impressive. It certainly did amount to a demonstration, and it went on throughout the applause at the end of the opera.
But the musical establishment couldn't understand why the Hecklers had chosen Gawain for their protest.
To choose Harrison Birtwhistle's Gawain, which is actually one of the richest pieces of new dramatic music that I have heard in my lifetime, it was just absolutely bonkers.
They were objecting to Birtwhistle as a thing because he'd made complexity successful.
They think, why isn't it me up on that stage? Why am I not being played? And quite often the reason is because actually they're not very good.
I didn't know what their problem was. I told them to go away and prove that they were better.
And that's exactly what they tried to do. But 13 years on, Stocken and Burstein's campaign hasn't quite benefited them or their music as much as they'd hoped.
In a way now, I look back on it with a great sense of sort of horror, really, because even at the time it was quite out of character. In a way, it was just like an overspill from sort of undergraduate sort of pranks, really.
What I don't want to do is to come across as someone who's just Mr. Grumpy, because that was how we were portrayed at the time, you know, as just kind of disaffected failures who were bitter and therefore had gone to this desperate point of kind of using a media stunt to attract attention.
It's come to haunt me, and these days I'm very much sort of, you know, judge not that ye be not judged.